Hi, I'm Ralph Lawton, and in this series of videos I'm going to show you how we built this simple hall table. The next job is to put the tenons on the end of the rails. We've got two little rails for the ends and two long rails. The rails have been cut to include the length of the tenons, which is 22 millimeters. So what we've got to do now is mark 22 millimeters in from the end. The temptation is to mark 22 millimeters in from that end as well. Now that in theory should give us the correct distance between shoulders between here and here. The safest way is to come in 22 millimeters, mark the length of the rail, and then just double check that's 22 millimeters. If it's a fraction under, it's not going to make any difference. If it's a fraction over, you'll have to trim a bit off. So let's start by putting one of these to one side, and we'll check them out. We'll work off of this end to start with. When you've got repetitive measurements like this, it's quite nice to use one of these little rule stops. It's a handy little thing. I've used it once or twice before, I think, in this video. I'll just set that to 22 millimeters. Then all I've got to do is put a mark on there, and I know that I'm right. I don't need to do it here because all I need to do is to extend the rule round from the other side. So there we are. Take that over there. And now when I run down this side, the rule on the front should align with the rule on the back. If it doesn't, your wood's not square, or your square's not square. And there we are, perfect. So we're okay there. Now, as I said, we need to mark up the other end. This needs to be 735 millimeters long. So 735, put a little mark in there. Just check it with this, absolutely spot on. So we know that we're okay for length. So we can go back to using our little rule stop, put our mark on, square across the face, down that edge, down that edge, and square it across. So now we've got our shoulders marked. Our structural shoulders are this side and here. Now we could just cut those off, but in order to make a cosmetically better looking joint, we'll take another edge off of these as we go. Now our mortise is 80 millimeters wide. Our rail is 100 millimeters wide, so we need to take 10 millimeters off of each side of that to make it fit in the mortise correctly. This timber is 22 millimeters wide, and the mortise is 10 millimeters wide. So we need to take 12 millimeters out of the width. Now we're going to take 6 millimeters out of each side, which, if I use one of these little offcuts, will center that rail quite nicely on the leg. But if we wanted to move it further forward or further back, we could offset that tenon, and we could just cut the tenon one-sided and make a bare-faced tenon, or we could just move it in a bit further to change that offset. But it's quite pleasing at centered, and it also means that if you keep everything symmetrical, it doesn't matter which way round it goes, it will always fit. So we need to mark on here 10 millimeters from each side, and we'll use the little rule stop to do that. Acts as a little gauge as well. Same on here. Now, I'm just going to mark the top. I'll just put it in the vise because it's just easier to hang on to. I'm going to put it in the top and just mark across the top there. Now, for the actual width of the tenon, if you remember, we had the mortise gauge set to mark the mortises on the legs. Now, we haven't changed anything here, and if we were to use it exactly as it is, it would offset the tenon so that the leg would be flush with the rail. Now, for simplicity, it's easier just to centre this, and it looks quite nice on there. It's about right. So we're going to centre the tenon on here, the centre of the tenon on the other end, which makes this rail completely symmetrical in all directions. You can't assemble it the wrong way. You also can't cut the joint the wrong way. It just makes it a bit simpler. So first of all, I've got to reset this, and we do that in exactly the same way as we did before. We set it visually to approximately halfway, loosely tighten it. Take the pins around either side. It's a bit harder to see in end grain, but we're almost there, I think. Yep, that's pretty good. Just by fluke, we got it in the right place. Now we're going to mark the tenon using the gauge, and just straight the way across. Now we're going to mark right the way across down to the edges over our cosmetic tenons here.